All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Monday, June 12th, Watertown City Board of Adjustment meeting. Brandy, if I can get a roll call.
Yes, Aletsky. Present. Spire.
Present.
Dolly.
Here.
Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
And then Kays, Brink, and Ford are absent. We have a quorum. And so with this action, then there will be four voting in favor for a pass for the conditional uses. And there are no variances on this agenda.
All right, thank you for the clarification on that. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Need a motion and a second for that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the May 25th, 2023 Board of Adjustment. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion on those? Everything look good? All in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the regular agenda. Item 5A is board consideration of a conditional use for bar or tavern in the C1 district at 218 East Kemp. Brandy?
Yes, thank you, Blake. So this is a conditional use application for a bar tavern located at 218 East Kemp. And this property is zoned C1 Community Commercial District, which is located downtown. It is a 1906 boutique, so it will not be a bar tavern, but still when they're asking to be able to serve alcoholic beverages on premise, then they need to have a bar tavern conditional use. The board could stipulate, if this business, if it's tied to this property, if it were to change into just a bar tavern that it would just be tied to this use, so that you could review things further if it was going to be an actual bar establishment. There is no off-street parking requirements in the C1 district. And so with that, I'll stand by with any questions or for any
Yeah,
questions.
Brandy, we've had a few other businesses very similar to this boutique hair salon that we've also allowed this type of conditional or accessory use to that principal use. Have we had those restrictions on those businesses in terms of being part of that business, in terms of transference?
So actually, we haven't had an application really since we have changed the ordinance now. So when somebody is just doing off sale, like the grocery stores and whatnot, they do not need a bar tavern conditional use. So before we had not, because there wasn't, we didn't have that difference, I guess, or the differentiation between on or off premise alcohol consumption. So no, we hadn't before. But it's just really that it wouldn't end up turning into that being the main use. But just something to consider.
And then one additional question, Brandy. In some of the districts, we have restriction for bar and tavern use in vicinity of churches, educational structures. The C1 district is excluded from that condition, right?
Correct.
Because there's a church that shares that same block downtown.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, this does have a public hearing, so at this time I'll go ahead and open the public hearing if anybody here is going to speak on behalf or against. Is there any questions from the board?
I have a question. So they can buy the beer and walk out the door or not? Do that have to be drank on site?
It would have to be drank on site because then otherwise then it would turn into an open container.
And again, for clarification, that's not on the sidewalk, that's within the structure.
Correct. Now, if they wanted to come back and ask for a sidewalk cafe, if they wanted to put a table outside or whatnot, but the main use of this property is for a salon, so it's really accessory to that so that they would have the option to be able to sell beverages as well.
But they can't sell a six-pack closed and walk out the door. That's what I guess I'm asking.
No, well, and that, so, okay, that depends on their licensing aspect of it, but this conditional use is just for on-site.
Chair, if you will, I actually insure the business interests. So just for good order, housekeeping and all that, I will recuse myself from voting if necessary. However, I don't feel it will impair my impartiality with regards to the, the consideration of this application.
Yeah, I would leave that up to you to determine whether you need to recuse yourself or not. Certainly comfortable either way.
Then I will stay as part of this. I just would like to ask the applicant, if you have a consideration of what percentage of your revenue do you anticipate the liquor sales to be?
Yeah, yep, come on.
Yeah, if you just want to come up and state your name for the record.
Yep, Shauna Shelton.
Oh, here you go, you can sit over here.
Yeah, I'll have the microphone there, so it'll help pick it up for the recording.
Shauna Shelton. Well, first of all, thank you. Appreciate the questions and allowing me to be here. The intent is to just be able to let somebody relax while they're getting their hair done and maybe enjoy a beverage as well. We anticipate this to be less than 5% of our entire business. This is just a little extra way to help somebody enjoy their time as we pamper them.
Thank you. Other questions for the applicant from the board? Thank you.
Yeah.
This time I'll close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion for approval and a second. Any additional discussion on this? It's consistent with the zone and
I think it's a great idea. We've approved this before for other places, like you said, and I think it's great.
all right, we'll take a roll call vote.
All right, Hanson,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Valetsky.
Yes.
All in favor is passed. None against, so that motion carries. Moving on to item 5B on the regular agenda, it's board consideration of a conditional use. This is apartments within the C3 highway commercial. Brandy?
Yes, thank you, Blake. So this property is located just south of Montgomery Furniture, along Jensen Avenue. It's sometimes referred to as the Moriarty property. And I'll just get this zoning pulled up here. So the request for the conditional use for apartments, and then so that would either be, on top, making it mixed use on top of commercial businesses that are on the first floor, or having the option to do some apartments behind those mixed use buildings. And so really it's just the ask if that would be an option to be able to develop this property. And so this property is zoned C3 highway commercial, and most likely it would stay, it would stay that, especially if they would be granted the conditional use. But then the rest of the property you would most likely see come forward in a concept plan development through the Plan Commission. So, but this is just the upfront ask, I think, to be able to know if what the proposed developer would be able to implement. So, all of the requirements, as far as an apartment, so this is C3 with off-street parking, any of the ordinance requirements they would need to make sure that they were adhering to at the time of development. And if they were not able to, then that would obviously come back to the board as a variance. So all of those things would be reviewed at the time of application. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Brandy, in terms of how we typically look at these proposals for conditional use, correct me if I'm wrong, but normally we'd be looking at something of a site plan and a concept plan about the apartment building before we're getting to the conditional use of apartments.
So we actually, again, we changed that application process because that was never a requirement in ordinance. And so we have allowed people to make the ask up front to the board if this use is appropriate before going through the expense and time of designing an apartment building, if it's not even okay to have on the property at all.
Right, because we want to get to that question of whether that type of use is reasonable for that location within the city, with the neighborhood and the zoning immediately adjacent to them, before we go through the expense.
Yep.
I had one additional question, Brandy, and just in Jensen Avenue specifically, we've had discussions over the years about the infrastructure on Jensen. And I do recall multiple applications in the past where we've had waiver of right to protests around those infrastructure improvements pending some larger triggering event. I think if you look at the development that's happening with Montgomery's, and then if this potentially develops across the street, that basically completes all the development of Jensen Avenue, or a majority of the development of Jensen Avenue. At the point of this development, would that be a triggering event for infrastructure improvements?
Yes. So upon building permit application, and then before it was issued, we would do a waiver of right to protest with them. And then that would be something, that the engineering division would be looking at as far as if and when Jensen would need to be upgraded and improved. But
And-
we would get a waiver of right to protest so that, because actually it would probably end up being an assessment project.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask.
Even without a waiver of right to protest, they could still do an assessment project, but then that way it's just a known thing up front for the developer.
Because the question has been, at some point we need to reconstruct or substantially improve Jensen Avenue as a city. And you don't necessarily want to install that infrastructure and then have it, taken out when you redo the road, right?
Right. Yep. So yeah, no, definitely that would be deferred until that project would happen.
Okay. This also has a public hearing, so I'll open that public hearing now.
Chair, just a quick question. Is that something we need to, me and my streets? Is that something we need to make a conditional use upon, that if that is indeed developed, that street gets widened at that point? Because, again, that's a pretty narrow street on that, especially there's not much shoulder on that south side. Or is it safeguarded? It's not going to be the development goes in and then 3 years later we're fixing the street. It would be something that would be done coincide with the development?
So, and actually it would, being that the infrastructure exists today, and as long as engineering would evaluate that, and as far as what the development, what they would be generating for traffic counts, if that needed to be widened, the only thing about it is then it's only for that small section where it would end up most likely being an entire reconstruct of Jensen at one time, so that there wasn't, in this area, that it wasn't widening out and then it was narrowing back up here.
Right, that's what I mean. So if this parcel comes in, then the whole thing would get, because I assume all those other, Shopko, or, well, it's not Shopko anymore, but all those businesses have the right of waiver sitting there waiting to be.
Well, and like I said too, even if they don't, we could do an assessment project, but it just depends on the time sensitivity of it. And if it is, if this is something that needs to be done, where it falls as far as priority.
And this is like city priority too, right? So we've got multiple streets and you're evaluating from an engineering department standpoint, city standpoint.
Yep.
Where the priorities are for any given year. Yeah, I'm sure that additional development here and with the Harbor Freight going into that side of the mall, there are factors that the city will weigh on this. But the way that we've approached it for the rest of Jensen Avenue in the past has been, kind of just getting those waivers. And then when it becomes a priority for the city based on the economics, that we would be covered then with those waivers.
Yep. And then they have their capital improvement plan too, and they have things, slotted for each year of what needs to be done as far as priority. And those can switch, based on development and just what has changed in the area. So that's something that they're always evaluating. annually for sure, but throughout the year. Annually, it gets brought to council, so during the budget process.
Was there anybody here to speak in the public hearing while it's open? Anybody on Teams? Okay, we'll close the public hearing on this. We will need a motion from the board.
Make a motion to approve.
A motion for approval,
Second.
and a second. Any additional discussion by the board?
I have just a few questions. So is that, and refresh me, Brandy, that PUD, does that get us right away all the way to 212? Or is this kind of locked going west out of, is the only ingress egress west out of Jensen?
No, so this 11th Street was extended through this PUD process when they redeveloped the Montgomery site. Right now, though, it's just not constructed all the way. It hadn't because where they got to in the winter.
Yeah.
Now, this year, it will be fully extended. And so they had 2 years to construct that or install it. So that's, that should be completed this year.
But that paved section to the east of the old Sears building is not public right of way. It's a straight north-south shot right through the middle of the PUD?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, so this was, this is just city property, it never was right of way, and then obviously it was the bypass route when they were doing the 212 construction. And then, but we were able to work with them to relocate where this additional access to 212, so you didn't have to go all the way to 81, would be during this redevelopment project. So it has great alignment and it creates better connectivity. From
That's
212 and
west of
11.
the traffic control, right? That's that kind of,
Straight south, because now there's a four-way.
so that's going to come straight off of the, like that federal, or that whatever, South Dakota Credit Union
Yep,
intersection? Okay.
yep. So what, like right now. you
Dakota
can-
Land.
Yeah, you can go down by Lewis and Tropical Smoothie. So, but it just isn't all the way through
Got
yet,
it.
just because of where they landed when winter came. So,
It's done or close to done. Okay, I just wasn't sure, because I was, it seems like an odd place to put apartments, especially if you've only got one way in and out, and that way is Jensen Avenue and then 81, or driving through Shopko's, whatever it is, Studio 212's parking lot. I just wanted to make sure that there was some way in and out of it.
yeah. No, and that's really too, with apartments and LATC growing, it does have a nice straight shot up to LATC up 11th, so.
Yeah, one other question about that PUD. When we looked at that plan, I think there was some discussion around the waterway there and some potential walking path. Is that a city project to install that?
So that is also a part of this Sinclair Square redevelopment and their TIF. So they will be installing some recreational trail, pedestrian route along there. And all of that, it's still under the development agreement, so it's an active construction project. And then, so yeah, we did not, obviously, we need that property, the city does, for maintaining Roby Creek, this drainage channel here. And so we were very strategic on what we retained, manholes as well. We need to be able to have access to the manholes because, too, this is the main line that feeds the wastewater facility. So it was, there was a lot of discussion and strategy behind all of that, but I think it ended up being everything went through. So the win-win for the developer and the city of what we each were trying to accomplish.
And we could expect, though, when we do get to the Jensen Avenue infrastructure improvements, and we're talking, sidewalk all the way down that strip at that point, that it would tie into that walkway.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Brandy, it's Monday, so bear with me. I think you kind of hit some of this earlier, but so in this property, if we're going to give them blessing that they can put apartments up there, but what will trigger infrastructure as far as roads in and out of there. You know, currently that's a big piece of property with, kind of like Liam said, one way in, one way out. But as far as, you know, garbage, fire truck, that type of thing, will they have to construct
Yeah.
roads or?
Good, yeah, good question. So they will need to, because also this area has not been conceptually planned. So they would need to extend 11th and then also connect to 14th, which, if you recall, is being extended today. And then this portion would most likely time up with it. But so there would have to be connectivity to each of these streets through here. So that's why you guys would see this come through as a concept plan.
And that's all one owner, right, that tract of land?
Yep.
The one that we're looking at today, or the stuff to the south, that's, are you talking about the I-2 or I-1 or whatever that is?
So, yeah, this I-1 is all one owner. They subdivided, and then so they extended it about 60 feet for the first phase of their development. And then as they do additional phases, then that's when they'll extend that street there. And the thing too about just this timing of it is, I think that the main thing is they would need apartments to be able to develop this land. So that's why you're seeing this before even a concept plan. But then all of those details, we'll look at it and we'll have a plan in
Right.
front of us, where then we can look at that as the plan commission.
Okay, so I'm back to kind of where Liam is going with that. So it's not just the orange portion up there, not that nice little square. It comes all the way down by the water treatment plant then.
This property as a whole, yes.
And that's the 18 acres that you're referring to.
No, so they're only asking for a conditional use for apartments in the C3 area,
Oh,
only in that red.
okay.
But that's one single platted lot though, right? I didn't
Yep.
realize that. Interesting.
Okay.
And yeah, and it hasn't been platted. It's portions of,
Excuse me.
Yeah, the legal description needs some help.
oh yeah. We
Okay,
could not issue
but
any
the
building permits
developer-
until that got cleaned up.
And not that that's, I guess it's immaterial, but I'm going to ask a question. So the developer is buying that whole odd-shaped piece then, but only asking for the conditional use on the parcel in orange?
And that, I am
Or
not
don't
sure.
you know that?
No,
He's only buying the partial in orange, that as far as you're concerned, as far as we're concerned today.
right.
Okay, so when you said it has to connect down to 14th, did you say, or whatever? So who's responsible for that then? This developer or Moriarty?
So whoever ends up subdividing the entire land, if they would be selling it or developing, or if the current owner is going to develop, they would have, no matter what, whoever owns this piece of property has to make sure, but if he would sell off this portion, or he or she, I'm not sure, would sell off the C3 portion, this developer would be responsible to extend it to the end of their property. And then if this was sold off separately then they would be responsible to connect here. However, I would think that they should be hesitant about doing that, because then you are, in a sense, landlocking pieces of this land and then basing it on other development, and where they're phasing lands.
So if they do subdivide, though, you could potentially just see a stub of a street there pending development of the southerly portion.
Yep. But long-term transportation plan.
Yep.
That 14th and 11th will be
It
connected.
needs to be because of the master street plan.
Yep.
I think just in general terms of, you know, fit for the area, conditional use wise, mixed use is certainly something that I've been strongly encouraging. I think apartments certainly make sense in that area. We've got apartments further to the east, right by Hy-Vee there. So it seems like a strong fit.
And I should have mentioned too, apartments or the mixed use does adhere to our comprehensive land use plan.
Yep.
Chair, if I may. So could you bring that map back up, please, Brandy?
Yeah.
How low is that, where those trees are? There, yeah, okay, where the two parcels kind of connect. Is that really marshy, or is that developable? that a word?
It's developable. It's developable.
Well, okay, here's my fear. So I'm just going to throw this out there. So the applicant today buys the orange portion, and then the bottom portion sits for 20 years. And yet we have that orange portion full of apartments, full of activity, and maybe that other portion never gets. So we have no control over getting that street in, is what I'm saying. If they break that parcel apart, we are just dead ducks until, we're all gone. It could maybe never get developed. There's no requirement. That's where I'm going with that.
But that is actually ahead of it because we would still need to see a concept plan and a plat. And if you guys weren't comfortable with what was being proposed to be platted and what they were showing for right-of-way, that would be your time to.
Well, again, but see, then they went and spent money, and then we're feeling guilty that they spent money to do a concept plan, and we don't have a connectivity there. That's where I would say that if we do this, that we should at that point say, okay, the whole street needs to go in. If we're going to add, how many apartments, it just gives, like I said, that access out. So I'm just saying to the developer, if he's listening, that I don't know that I like the idea of them not taking that whole parcel, putting that whole street in.
The
Or
thing
at least,
too
I don't know.
is that we have this all the time with phasing of developments where they'll show their phasing on their concept plan and then they would do a turnaround, a temporary turnaround and as long as everything was checking out as far as traffic counts and what they were generating, honestly, for it connecting down on 14th into an industrial area wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for apartments anyway, and where especially most of town is to the north, where their most convenient access point would be Jensen. Correct. And for fire safety, all of those code would be met, and so they would have some thresholds there as far as like how many units they could have if they didn't have secondary access, things like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, where you see that green portion, is that protected waterways or anything, or why is it?
Right here?
No. Go south. Yeah, you see that green or brown or whatever that is?
So this is the floodplain map, and this bluish gray area is the 500 year, and then this just isn't in the floodplain at all.
It's even higher there.
So 500 year, there are no floodplain restrictions. And then this pinkish red is the 100 year, and that's where floodplain regulations are required.
Note how it stops right at that lot line.
So Brandy, one other question, just,
We wouldn't want our wastewater facility.
so for the initial phase development apartment complex, is there going to be only that one main egress from 11th there, Jessen?
Not necessarily. If it checked out with engineering design standards and they could do additional access, that would be okay.
Because there's no lateral east-west at all, it's just all access from the north right now off of Jensen.
Right,
Yeah.
right now. And then when they concept plan, that's when we'll look at
Right,
how they're
right.
gonna lay out the street
Just
system.
internal to that plot there, as far as getting fire access, multiple points there, it wouldn't be a singular access point.
Yeah, so, but as long as, that's all what we'd have to review still, and what they were proposing, how many units, what they need to meet as far as building code, fire code, planning, zoning, all of that would be reviewed. It's just, and there's quite a bit of frontage there along Jensen, so they should be able to have additional access based on our engineering design standards.
Yeah, so we'll review that just like we do any other development, any other building permit. Today, we're strictly looking at zoning and whether or not, we're comfortable with mixed use with apartment as a conditional use in the area.
Yep.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote.
All right, Aletsky,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Durgus Johnson,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
All right, 6 yes, 0 no, so that passes unanimously. Move on to item 6 on the agenda is open public comment. I don't think there's anybody here to speak on an item that wasn't on the agenda, so we'll move on to new business. Any new business?
I was just going to remind you guys that October 24th through the 26th is the South Dakota Planners Association annual conference. So, and we've invited Plan Commission to attend. We actually do have some very applicable content this year, and I believe that will be on Wednesday. So, and I'll forward you guys the agendas, but just wanted to give you a heads up with your schedules if that's something that you'd be interested in attending. I know it's on the parliamentary procedure and ex parte communication, and then as always, then Zach and Jack give some legal issue discussion, and that's always interesting, just as the board. And then otherwise, I mean, just a lot of good content in this conference. So. Wanted to extend the invitation, and I'll do a more formal email that you guys can be in touch if
Where'd
you'd
you
like
say
to
that is
attend.
this year?
Mitchell.
Mitchell, okay.
Yeah, right around pheasant season, so should be busy.
Also, there will be a discussion held tonight at the work session for the Lake Commercial District.
Yes, yeah, great reminder there, Jana.
Yeah, and that's going to be upstairs in the.
Public Works Director, Public Works,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We hammered that out last week.
So
Yes.
anybody interested tonight? Any other new business? Old business?
And that I have.
All right, motion to adjourn. All in favor? Any opposed to adjournment? All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you guys for being flexible and showing up here.